Morning, everyone. Great to see you. I hope you can hear me okay. I think I've unmuted. Somebody get in touch with me if there's any problem there at all. Big thank you for this opportunity to share with you. Thank you for your prayers, your concerns. Thank you for those who've been in touch, asking how myself and Angela is. Appreciate that. Thank you for your support. Thank you to the church for your financial support. That's been a real benefit to us. For those of you who perhaps don't know me, I just want to take a few moments to share who I am. There's a few faces on the Zoom screen that I don't recognize. So as you heard, my name is Ivor Cooper. I'm married to Angela. We live in Leamington Spa on the north side of Leamington, the Covington-Lillington border. We're members of Myton Church, and for years I've worked in the Warwickshire area as an evangelist, travelling around lots of different churches, sharing the good news, sometimes wider than that in the UK, and on occasions, but not very often, on occasions abroad as well. The subject that I'm dealing with this morning was something that Ian gave me as a choice, really, amongst other things, but this is the one I chose. It was coping with suffering. And what you've got this morning is more of a testimony than a sermon or a preach. So forgive me if you wanted a sort of 3-point sermon. This isn't what you'll have from me this morning. So it's a bit of my story that Celia's already sort of filled you in. I'll give you a bit more of that in a moment. And I want to make clear right at the very beginning, this isn't a call for sympathy or anything like that. And it's not a game of top trumps either. I've found in the last few years that very often when you're suffering from a certain disease and you meet somebody else who's suffering, you can start sort of playing off against each other just how ill you are. How many hospital visits have you had? I remember when we went to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham on the first occasion, we sat next to somebody, I think it was our second or third visit, and the people we were sitting next to said it was their 95th visit. And you can do that with your illness as well, that I've had 6 cancers, I've had 7. So it's not sort of top trumps here. Hopefully what my experience has done for me has made me a little more sympathetic to those who are suffering, many far worse than I've suffered, and given me perhaps a little more patience, but we may come back to that. And the shape of what I want to do this morning is I'm going to give you a bit of practical background, just bring you up to date with where things are, how I got to the place where I am at the moment, some of the consequences of that to me as an individual, to the work that I've been involved in, how am I handling it, what tools do I use to interpret the stuff that I've been going through. And then again, as Celia mentioned, if it works technically and if it works practically, if you want to, there'll be a Q&A session at the end, and I'll answer as honestly and sincerely as I can with that. So I hope that's okay for you guys. That's the way we're going to go. So first of all, practically, what's happened to me? Many of you are aware that it was back in 2015, so 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago, that I originally was diagnosed with kidney cancer. I've been unwell for about 12 months beforehand, and had various tests, and eventually it was diagnosed that I had stage 4 kidney cancer. And May 2015, I went into hospital, had the kidney and the cancer removed. And after that, constant monitoring with CT scans and visits over to what we used to call the Walsgrave Hospital, the University Hospital, Coventry and Warwickshire, to see how things go, because it's known that kidney cancer can spread to other parts of the body, specifically to the bones, to the lungs, and to the brain. And all those scans I had subsequent to the operation were found to be clear. And it was on the 5th of July 2018, so just 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, that I was in for one of these regular checks to see if things had spread. And everything was clear. And I said to my consultant, I said, just help me with language here, would you? What words do I use to describe myself at the moment? Am I in remission? Is that the phrase? Is there something else I should say? And he looked at me straight in the eyes and he said, oh, Mr. Cooper, you are cured. You're cured. And I thought, oh, that's good. I didn't really expect to hear that phrase. You're cured of your kidney cancer. So we chatted a bit more and then I left. And I left Coventry Hospital to go and pick up a couple of my grandchildren from their primary school at Brighton-on-Dunsmore. And they'd just got into the car and I felt down my left side a strange sort of twitching feeling and my left hand went numb. It was there for a few minutes and then it left me. And I thought, oh, well, never mind. And so I carried on driving, which is a good idea, and took the kids home, thought nothing of it. But over the next few days and weeks, I had more of these turns, as I described them, where the left side of my body went numb and certain things twitched and things weren't right. This was 2 years ago, in the beginning of the summer, 2 years ago. So went to the GP, had various tests, and after one particularly nasty turn, I went to the A&E in Warwick, and they gave me a CT scan, and they said pretty well immediately, you've got cancer in your brain. We can see at least 2 cancers in your brain. So it was quite strange. On the very day that my kidney consultant said you're cured, I had my first symptoms for my brain cancer. And so I was quickly processed and they discovered a total of 4 cancers in my brain. And if any of you have ever been through this sort of process, I don't know why, but cancers are very often measured by compared to the size of fruit or something else that's edible. It seems to be a standard measure. Like they often say, you know, things are the size of whales, not cancers, but, you know, things are measured by the size of whales or football pitches. Cancers are measured by the size of edible substances, I find. And so I had a cancer the size of a walnut, another the size of a pea, and 2 small ones the size of rice, I think it was. And I was given the choice of a number of procedures at that time. One was a physical intervention, craniotomy, going into the brain and scooping these cancers out. But because they were spread out over the right-hand side of my brain, it was very difficult because there would have to be multiple access points. But they explained to me that there was a process I could have at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital up in Birmingham called stereostatic radiology, which is also called CyberKnife, which is a non-invasive process. And of course, I went for the non-invasive one. And so, and I'd like to say that all through this, the NHS, right up to this point, even with COVID going on, have been absolutely excellent. And I don't feel that I've dropped through any cracks or had my treatment cut short or hindered in any way over the last 2 years. So I was referred at this point, so it was still 2 years ago, to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham for CyberKnife surgery. And I was fitted with a mask. Here's a visual aid, the only visual aid I had this morning. I was fitted with a mask. Here is the mask. Does that look anything like me? Perhaps in profile it might. And the purpose is that this mask holds your head fixed in a certain position while they shoot you from 3 different directions with radiation, basically. But it's very focused to try and burn these cancers out from the inside out. And it was at the end of August 2018 when I had my first radiostatic surgery on the 4 cancers that had been discovered in my brain at that time. I got up from that procedure, which just took 2 hours. It was quite a long time to be held in one position, but it was painless, and I felt fine. And I thought, well, that's okay for the moment. So end of August 2018, I had my first brain sort of procedure, and turned out being not so bad. But one of the problems of this particular process is that it can cause quite a lot of swelling, and particularly the larger tumour, which was the size of a walnut. I had a lot of swelling around that, which caused all sorts of symptoms. Also, I was put on a lot of fairly heavy drugs, steroids, anti-fitting drugs, and other things as well, which all combined over the following 18 months or so started to cause many other side effects. I had a blood clot on my lungs. My bones, because I was on a high dose of steroids, became very brittle, and I fell over and I broke my back, which reduced my mobility. And my left side was, and still is, affected, almost like a mini stroke really down my left side. And my left hand, I've got very little strength and dexterity in my left hand. For those of you who know me, I don't think I'll ever play the guitar again, which is a great relief to the world. But I've lost the use in my left hand completely. But otherwise, I wasn't too bad. Improving quite well up to about November last year, but then things started to deteriorate quite badly. And I went back to see my consultant, and they suggested that they did an intervention into my brain, to one of the areas that had been hit by this cyberknife, and to get rid of the swelling that was around it. So just before Christmas, it was in fact on election day, in December the 12th, I think it was, I had a craniotomy intervention into my brain on this side to get rid of the swelling. And I came out of that over Christmas, and I started to feel a whole lot better since that point in time, recovering from the operation, recovering from the broken back. And when the whole world went into lockdown and started to slow their lives down, they came down to my pace, which I'm very grateful for the world to sort of slow down to where I am at the moment. However, during that time, I was still having regular scans and visits to the hospital. They discovered another tumour, this time on the other side of my brain. And just 2 weeks ago, I was back at the QE for another cyberknife. So I've now got 2 of these. They had to make another one, and they burned that one. So I've had a total of 5 brain tumours dealt with in various ways over the last couple of years. And I've been told that it's going to be a little bit like weeding the garden, really, that my life will be a process of having scans. If there's something there, then they'll deal with it, probably by cyberknife. Sometimes I'll have to go in and get stuff out. Other times it'll just be left, and I can carry on with life as normally as I can. So that's all that's taken place over the last couple of years. The consequences of all that, apart from on occasions feeling physically quite ill and weak and tired, some of the other consequences is that I've had my driving license removed. So I can't drive now for at least another year, which for those of you who like your independence and like driving, can perhaps imagine how frustrating that is. My wife, as well as being my carer, is also my chauffeur as well. I'm unable to fly, in the sense of I can't go in an aeroplane because of the swelling that continues to be in my brain, so I can't fly. And I don't have as much energy as I used to have. I put on a whole lot of weight, which some of you might see. I can't blame it all on the steroids, but the steroids do have an effect of putting on a great deal of weight. I've still got this paralyzed left hand, and so I'm unable to work at the pace that I used to. Do just a few things like preparing for this morning. It might have perhaps in the past taken me 2 or 3 hours. It can perhaps take me 2 or 3 days to prepare stuff these days. My brain just hasn't got the capacity to hold and process stuff. My eyesight is a little bit strange as well. I've lost that independence I used to have because of the car, and my future is unsure, as is everybody's future. But if you look at the stats, which isn't always a good thing to look at, somebody of my age who gets brain cancer, the average life expectancy from diagnosis is about 5 years. Now, I'm 2 years into that, so perhaps I have 3 years more. My wife says, no, you've got longer than that. And I know that it does affect family in a far worse way in many ways than it does the individual who's suffering. But my life, in one sense, I know is limited because of what's taken place. My job, my work, well, it's certainly going to be different. Quite what that is, I don't know. It's still work in process. I'm still working out what shape my ministry should take at the moment. So how am I handling this? Now, I'm going to repeat, this is my story. I'm not playing top trumps. I'm not saying this is a pattern for everybody who goes through suffering. We all deal with these things in different ways, but there are perhaps 1 or 2 universal lessons. I know what my character is like. I know my personality pretty well. And my character, my personality is fairly level. Something good happens and I go, oh, that's good. And then I carry on. Something bad happens, I go, oh, that's a pity. And I carry on. So if it was some sort of wave on a machine, goes up and down, my life is pretty well just like this. It just rumbles along. I don't suffer from great highs or great lows. And that's the way that I've dealt with this, right from diagnosis through to this morning. I'm on the level. There's no dramas. There's no extreme emotions. I'm fairly open about this. I'm happy to talk about it and to share as much or as little as people want to hear. And I know I can bore people with this quite quickly. So I know personality plays a lot into illness and how you deal with illness and how you deal with suffering. And I'm thankful that I've got this sort of fairly level personality character that is enabling me to deal with it in a fairly sort of reasonable way, I suppose. However, as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian, I have deliberately allowed my personality and my character to be shaped and influenced as much as it can be. I do believe that there are certain things in personality and character that are fixed and can't be changed. They are the way that we're wired, the way that we have been created, but they can be influenced and molded. And we have choices to make. And those choices can influence our personality and our character, and they mold us. And for me, the Bible has for years, probably decades, been the main shaper, the main thing that has molded my character, my personality. Psalm 119 verse 11 says this: Lord, your word I have hidden in my heart. Lord, your word I have hidden in my heart. I decided a long time ago, before I was in any crisis, it was probably in my mid to late teens, when I really started to get serious about my faith in Jesus, that I was going to allow God's word to be the main influencer in my life, and what God said about the world, what God said about himself, about others, about me, would be the thing that would shape my thinking and my decision making. And so God's word I have hidden in my heart. And I'm glad that I did that at that point. And I've sort of, in a sense, renewed that vow on a number of occasions throughout my life, but not just at crisis points, at just ordinary times in my life. Yes, Lord, it's your word that I've hidden in my heart. That it's through the lens of God's word that I then interpret and deal with all the stuff that has come my way, whether it's illness or bad things that have happened, circumstances I've been through. God's word is the filter through which I interpret those things. And so it's not necessarily made sense of everything that's happened to me. There's still a lot of things I don't understand, and I say, I've got no idea why that's happened. But it's given me some tools. It's given me a rock on which I can stand, which has helped me through these bad times. I've spent hours in the last 2 years on various beds, having my brain scanned by CT and MRI and other processes as well. And I lie there and I talk to the Lord. And in a sense, I talk to myself in my own mind. And I allow God's word to be the shaper in those situations. You might want to ask me more about that in a few moments. But that's the thing that's really helped me, is God's word has been the main shaper of the way that I've dealt with what's going on. And so what has God's word, what has this worldview been telling me at this point in my life? Well, one of the first things that God's word has taught me is that life sucks, basically. Life sucks. For many people, many in far worse situations than myself, life deals an unpleasant hand. And I'm not exempt from it. What I've been going through, I know, is not half as bad as what many of you have had to deal with and what many people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And Christianity doesn't provide me immunity from sickness or bad times or death. Life, this world is broken, and cancer is one of the symptoms of a broken world. So although not providing some sort of spiritual antibody to illness, my faith has given me some tools, I've already said, to deal with the problem that I'm facing and the bad things that life throws my way. But basically, I know that I live and I am part of a broken world. So why shouldn't I get cancer? Why shouldn't I suffer in this way? What else should I expect in a world that is suffering at the moment from COVID-19, that has a Beirut situation, as we've been praying about? I'm part of a broken world, and I'm not exempt from that. But another thing that God's word is teaching me is that God is not separate or cut off from the brokenness of this world. It's a Celtic form of Christianity that has a certain phrase that you may have heard. Celtic Christianity talks of thin places in the world, certain places that you can go to or certain times that you go through where God seems very near, not distant. For many people, God often seems distant, but sometimes we come to thin places where God seems very near. You get examples of this actually in the Bible. Do you remember that time when Jacob had that encounter with God and literally wrestled with God? That was a thin place. You get Elijah when he was on the mountain and God sent past him lots of different experiences, but then he discovered God in the still small voice, and there was a thin place. Perhaps more significantly at the incarnation, when God himself came into this world in Jesus, that point at Bethlehem was a very thin place where God was literally there with humanity. And I think one thing that suffering does, if you allow it to, is provide you with this thin place where you experience God in a very new way, where you don't in ordinary life. And over the last 2 years, my understanding of God has developed, has grown. I'm not saying I know everything. It just shows how little I know, really. The more you know, the more you realize how little you know. But my suffering has provided a thin place, what's important, what's precious. And suffering does that. It's this thin place between myself and the Lord. Another thing I've learned is this, that God's plan and my plan may be very different, and usually are. Somebody has said, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I don't know if Ian is live on this, Ian Furlong, or whether he'll listen later on, but there's been a few occasions in recent years where Ian and I have spoken about retirement. Not that either of us at that time were thinking of retiring, and I'm not saying Ian is as well. This is not news. I'm trying to pass on. But we've just said, how do people in our sort of work retire? It's difficult. And so that's been a conversation. And I must admit, I've been throwing that idea of retirement way into the future. Oh, I'll wait till I'm in my 70s. I'm 64 at the moment, I think. Yeah, 64. I've been thinking it'd be a long time till I retire or stop the work that I've been doing for years. This has made me realise I've got to think that again. My life, my work is changing. It's going to change. What shape is that going to be? Well, frankly, I've got no idea. That again is still work in progress. But what this suffering has done is made me reassess my own plans. I had certain plans. God has got other plans. And that's made me realize that I'm not in control of my destiny. I was talking to somebody just last week, and she was saying, you know, what is God teaching us through the whole COVID-19 situation? And I said, well, one of the things he's teaching us is that we are not in control of our own destiny. You know, who would have thought 6 months ago, perhaps a bit more now, that we'd be living the way we are? God has other plans to the ones that we make. And personal suffering, my suffering has done that to me. I'm having to reassess my own future. But another thing, and perhaps this is the most important and most precious thing that I've been taught through this, is that the future is bright. It's not orange, but the future is bright. Whatever this cancer is going to do to my brain, to my body, because of Jesus, I know that one day I'm going to be with him. And the whole concept of heaven and being with Jesus has become far more real and something quite wonderful, that if the Lord decides to take me in the next few months or years, well, actually, I'm not bothered. For me to live is Christ, to die is gain. It's a better thing. So let me just finish this bit with some words from Revelation, which are great. And John says, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He'll wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain. The old order of things have passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. The future for me, for all who put their trust in Jesus, is bright, is great. And this time has made me realize the truth of that. So that's it. Ramblings from an older man who's suffered a little bit in the last few years. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks again for your prayers, for your support. I'm not quite sure how the technology is going to work, but over to some Q&As. So James, do I hear from you or Celia or what?
I'll interject. So what we're just going to do is have some Q&A. So we're just going to say, if you would like to ask Ivor a question, if you just want to unmute yourself and do that. If there's a couple of people wanting to do that, then if you could just politely wait for one person to finish before you unmute yourself. So over to anyone who wants to ask any questions.
I've got it's Jane here. Was there someone else as well?
You go
Just
ahead.
go, Jane. Jane, just go.
Ivor, thank you so much for that. I wondered, when you were really, really ill, what was the best way that people could help you, in particular with God's word? Was it to read to you from the Bible, and were there particular passages which really helped? Or was it for you to listen to Christian music, or what sort of things really helped you when you were really feeling very ill?
One of the things that has really helped me is simply a daily verse coming up on an app that I've got on my system, and that always was appropriate at the time. I felt, and I still to a degree feel, I find reading very difficult. One, because my eyes and two, my brain, just to process stuff. And I started to feel guilty because I couldn't read the Bible. I thought, oh, I've got more time to read the Bible now, but I couldn't do it. But having those words fed to me, that was through technology, I found very helpful. And I'm sometimes a bit skeptical about the odd verse picked at random from the Bible, because you can find a verse for any situation, can't you? But because they were chosen for me, as it were, by some sort of algorithm, I found that very helpful. Just a simple verse assuring me of God's love, his plans for me being good, etc., is what really helped. Going back to music has been great, and emotionally they just it can break me down. Certain songs, even as I think of them now, can just bring me to tears, which is a good thing, really. So good Christian music, we won't discuss what's good and what's bad, shall we, Roger? I found helpful.
Thank you, Ivor. I think it's been true for us that the daily email we've had with a verse or a thought has been a great help, and some people have been put on to using Lectio, which Ian introduced us to at a fairly early stage. And so, yeah, I think I can understand why that has been a great help to you. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Did we have somebody else?
Yeah, it was me. Mike Wells. Ivor, I was wondering, through all that you've been, the suffering that you've been going through, has it changed the way you pray for those who are suffering? Because that's something that we, how do you pray for somebody in your situation? Could you maybe help us a little bit from what you've been going through?
Well, yes, it certainly makes one aware of others. And I never realised the number of people that were suffering silently, both in my own church and other churches that I have contact with. So it just extended my repertoire. And I started, and I still have a list of particular people who I know are going through rough times. And so it gave me knowledge that I didn't have before. But I guess anyone can gain it if you started to ask around. And how do I pray for them? That's difficult, isn't it? I mean, the words that one uses, I'm not sure if they've changed at all, but you pray a little more intelligently. It's what do you pray for in those times? Do you pray for healing on every occasion? I think on occasions I do. And I've been asked, do I want to get better? Well, I think I do, which sounds terrible. And Angela, my wife, will say, yes, you do want to get better. Yeah, but I want to use this time to learn things about the Lord and about myself that I can't learn in ordinary situations. And I think that's what I pray for other people. Lord, through what they're going through, may they learn things about you. May this do something about their spiritual health more than their physical health. So that's what I pray for. But I know that's difficult when people are really hurting, to pray like that. But it's the spiritual benefit of this that I want to squeeze out of this situation. And that's what I pray for other people, I think. Lord, teach them more about you in this time. Does that make sense?
Once an evangelist, always an evangelist, Ivor.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yes, please.
Go, Suzanne.
You quoted the verse, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain.
Yeah.
I find that thought sorry, I'm a bit more emotional than you. I love that thought. I think that verse is really inspiring when I hear it from others. But I think what I struggle with is the pain of those who are left behind.
Yeah.
Is that something that perhaps you don't struggle with because of your more level personality, or are there tips that you can think of?
Yeah, I think my particular personality that I mentioned, this sort of being level, can appear to some to be almost uncaring and callous, because I know that my wife and two girls feel it a lot more than I do. You know, so I say, "Oh, I'll be with Jesus soon." They say that means you won't be with us, and it hurts them a lot more. So, although it's very precious to me, and I'm glad about that, I do know that for those who are witnessing my situation, it is I perhaps sometimes need to be careful as to how I talk, because it can seem almost frivolous, but it's not for them. It's a very real thing. So when I talk about my suffering, others suffer in different ways, and sometimes more deeply.